Microplastics are in everything, even rain. Can you spot them yourself? Subscribe, and let's look closer. Here I've got a glass of tap water, and I am going to mix in some shaved plastic. The plastic I'm using is this blue, kind of glittery-looking stuff called holographic sparkle. It's made mostly of polyvinyl chloride, otherwise known as PVC, and I promise it's safe because it's just glitter. But that glitter makes it really easy to see any particles suspended in the liquid. So it's perfect to show what microplastics look like. Here you can see it under normal room lighting conditions. It doesn't look quite right. So let's see it up close. Oh, those little glitters are really catching the light and creating these beautiful rainbow sparkles. But how do they compare to normal clean water? Well, here's some tap water without any plastic in it. And look at that sparkle. It looks so clean. Now let's turn off the lights and get an even closer look. That's looking a lot cleaner now, isn't it? Turn the lights back on. We can see that there's still a few particles floating around in there. But for the most part, it looks pretty good. So now let's turn our attention back to the water with the plastic in it. There's no way we be able to tell if there are microplastics in our water supply just by looking at it. But thanks to this glitter, we can see all the other particles floating around in the water. So here's where the experiment gets fun. I'm going to grab my trusty 3D printed microfluidic particle counter and load it up with some of this sparkly water. This device uses hydrodynamics to pull liquid samples from the surface of the water and pushes them through a tiny channel etched into a silicon chip. If there are any particles larger than about 1 micrometer in the water, they all get caught up on the way through. And then I can take a picture of each one and count them up. Let's quickly look at some clean water to calibrate. 0 particles detected. Okay, let's take a look at this sample of sparkly water. Wow, there sure are a lot of particles in here. We've got this big one right away. That's probably just a piece of glitter. But the next one we detect is much smaller. In fact, it's about the size of a single quantum compared to the soccer ball. And then it looks like this one, and this one are also in the same ballpark. These are probably just pieces of plastic from that glitter that were small enough to make their way through the system. But how do they compare to actual microplastics? Well, here's a sample of seawater I collected myself from the surface of the ocean. Let's look at that. Wow. So there's not only a lot more particles in the ocean water, but also a lot bigger ones. These ones aren't made out of glitter, they're actually black. And I've seen these kinds of particles before in unfiltered seawater. They're almost certainly microplastics, and since the ocean water is unfiltered, it's probably full of even tinier microplastics that this device can't detect. You might be thinking, wow, the ocean is so polluted that we can't even drink it anymore. But hold on, because that's not the whole story. See, this device can only detect particles that are suspended in the water column. But over 99% of microplastics in the ocean are actually found in the cells and tissues of marine organisms. And when I say organisms, I mean basically everything from plankton all the way up to whales. The problem is that since these particles are inside living things, they're really hard to get at and even harder to count. That's why researchers are developing new ways to detect microplastics inside fish tissue. Like this group of scientists who developed a method to extract DNA from fish cells and then use that to identify the types of microplastics they had ingested. Using this technique, they found that the fish they tested contained plastics like PET, which is used in clothing, in food packaging, nylon used in fishing nets, and polystyrene used in disposable cups and plates. They also found PVC, which is exactly what's in this glitter. Of course, just because something has microplastics in it doesn't mean you shouldn't eat it. After all, we eat tons of things that are full of microplastics, including the salt we put on our food. In fact, we eat more microplastics than any other type of human-made pollutant. How do we know this? Well, because a group of researchers collected samples of microplastics in various consumer products and then calculated how many particles we ingest every year. For instance, a recent study found that people who eat 2 servings of shellfish per week ingest between 11,000 and 26,000 particles of microplastic every year. This was more than the amount ingested by those who eat the same amount of vegetables or fruits. And it was also higher than the number of microplastic particles inhaled by those who live near busy roads. So eating your way to a longer life may come with a cost. But there's also another way we consume microplastics. A few years ago, researchers analyzed 18 brands of bottled water and found that most of them contain between 10 and 20,000 particles per liter of water. That's about 4 million particles in a year for someone who drinks 2 liters of water a day. Tap water isn't much better. A review published in 2022 found that the concentration of particles in tap water ranges between 1 and 100 particles per liter, depending on where you're getting your water from. This means that a person who drinks 2 liters of tap water a day could be ingesting anywhere between 2,000 and 2 million microplastic particles a year, and these numbers are just estimates. We have no idea what the true concentrations of microplastics in our food and water supplies are. And it's also unclear what impact, if any, they'll have on our health. Some research suggests that they'll be cleared from the body without causing any damage, while other studies have linked microplastics to inflammation, oxidative stress, and even changes in gene expression. Ultimately, though, we won't know how microplastics affect us until we've been swimming in them long enough to start seeing the effects. Now, if you've made it this far, I bet you're wondering what the answer to that riddle is. Well, the answer is microplastics. Microplastics are too small to see, yet they live in your sea, your food, and even your tea. And by now, you know they're probably in your tap water too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. You want to give science a try at home? Try this 5-minute ice cream science experiment? You can do it with your kids, and it shows how freezing and supercooling can change the texture of water.